Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at backups, multi-AZ and read replicas, and we're going to do this in a lab environment, so you will need to look into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console, and of course we can find RDS under databases, and I click in here and we have our database that we provisioned earlier on, and I've called it A Cloud Guru. And if you click on the name of the database, you'll be able to see things like connectivity, monitoring, logs and events, configuration, maintenance and backups, tags, etc., etc. And what we can do is we can do two things. We can go in and modify the database, or we can take some actions. So we could stop this database, reboot it, we could delete the RDS instance, we could go ahead and create Aurora read replicas. And this is actually a good way of migrating your MySQL databases over to Aurora. You can actually just create a read replica of your MySQL database. We can go in and take a snapshot, and then we can migrate snapshots. So if we click on take a snapshot, that will take a snapshot and it will create if we were then to restore from that snapshot, it is going to create an entire new RDS instance. So if I just click up onto modify, what we're going to do first of all is we're going to turn on multi-AZ. So let's go ahead and hit yes. And this will basically go ahead and give us multi-availability zones for this database. So that's the only change I'm going to go in and make. And I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And it says you may experience significant performance impact when converting this database instance to multi-AZ configuration. This impact will be more noticeable on database instances with large amounts of storage and write-intensive workloads. So you may want to do this if you are going to do this on a production database. You would hope that your production databases are already multi-AZ, but if you are going to do this, you might want to do it basically in a scheduled maintenance window. So you could say apply during the next scheduled maintenance window, or you obviously want to do it after hours. I'm going to apply this immediately. It does give me a warning that there's going to be some potential downtime, but let's go ahead and hit modify. And that's going through and modifying my database. And if we click on databases in here, we'll be able to see the status currently says available. But if I hit refresh, you can see it's now changed to modifying. So I'm just going to pause the video and wait for this to become a multi-AZ database. Okay, so my RDS instance is now available. If I go ahead and click on it, I'll be able to see in here, if we go to configuration, if we scroll down, you can see that multi-AZ has now changed to yes. So this is a multi-AZ database. And what we can actually do is if we go into actions and do a reboot, we can actually reboot with failover, and this is a way of forcing our availability zones to change. So you can change from one availability zone to another by just rebooting and rebooting with failure. I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to go back to this database. I'm going to go ahead and modify it again. And what I'm going to try and do is turn on read replicas. Now, read replicas won't actually work. And the reason for that is because I do not have my backups turned on just yet. And you need to have your backups turned on in order to do a read replica. And you won't actually find an option to turn read replicas on in here. What you actually need to do is go back to your databases page. And then in here, if you click on actions, you can see here, create read replica. But right now we can't do that. And the only reason for that is because we do not have backups turned on. So let's go ahead and turn on backups. So I'm just going to click in here, go ahead to modify. We're going to turn on our backups by going all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to do my retention period. Your retention period can be up to 35 days. So I'm going to turn mine on for 35 days. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And then that's going to modify this database, and I'm going to apply it immediately. This can cause some downtime, so it is going to give you a warning. And we can now see that that is now changing my database. And if I click in databases and I refresh the status, it is now modifying. So again, I'm going to pause the video and wait for my backups to be turned on. And then we're going to go ahead and create a read replica. Okay, so that was a lot quicker than creating a multi-AZ. It was only offline for a couple of minutes. And if I click on actions now, I can now select create read replicas. If yours is still grayed out, just do a hard refresh of the screen. So Command R or Control F5, and then you should be able to see the create read replica. So I'm going to go ahead and create a read replica. Note that you can change the destination region, so I could have my read replica anywhere in the world. And what I might do, I think I'll just keep it in this region just to make it simple. Do we want our read replicas to be publicly accessible? I'm going to say no. Do you want your read replica to be encrypted? Do you want to enable encryption on it? I'm just going to leave it as a no. Do you want your read replica to have multi-AZ deployment? I don't really care about that. I'm just basically going to leave everything as the default options, and I'm going to go ahead and hit create read replica. You will have to give it a name, so a DB instance identifier. I'm going to call it a Cloud Guru read replica, so I know that it's a read replica. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So that is now creating my read replica. It's modifying this and then creating a new database instance down here, which will have its own DNS endpoint. And notice the role here. You can see that we've got our master and then we've got our replica. So I'm going to pause the video and just wait for that to come back up online. Okay, so my read replica is now available. I can see it in here. And if we click on it and go ahead to our actions, we can actually see that we can now promote our read replica. So we can make this our primary, another primary database, and then we could add read replicas to it as well. So feel free to go ahead and delete that read replica. We're not going to be using it later on, and you need to just type in delete me in order to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Please keep your RDS instance, however, because we are going to turn that into an Aurora instance. We're going to look at how we can migrate from MySQL to Aurora. That is a popular exam scenario. So we're going to do that later on in this section of the course. But first, let's go ahead and have a look at my exam tips. So just remember, going into your exam, there's two different types of backups for RDS. So we have our automated backups, and they're going to be done in a scheduled maintenance window. And then we also have our database snapshots, and they're taken manually. And we saw how to do that earlier on in this lab. Moving on to read replicas, these can be multiple availability zones, and they're used to increase performance. In order to have a read replica, you must have backups turned on. Read replicas can be in the same region or in different regions, and they can be MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, Oracle, and Aurora. The only one you can't have a read replica for currently is SQL Server. And they can be promoted to masters, and when you do this, it's going to break the read replications. So please do bear that in mind as well. With multiple availability zone RDS instances, just remember that this is primarily, well, it's only used for disaster recovery, and you can force a failover from one availability zone to another by rebooting the RDS instance. And then finally, just remember that encryption is supported for MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and Aurora, so it's encrypted for all 6 of the engines. Encryption is done using the AWS KMS service, and once your RDS instance is encrypted, the data stored at rest in the underlying storage is encrypted, as are automated backups, read replicas, and snapshots. So we've learned an awful lot about relational databases. In the next lecture, we're going to look at DynamoDB, which is Amazon's non-relational database. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.